So now after all that painting, it's now time to rebuild the locomotive. Won't be taking it apart again, hopefully. With the hindsight of actually putting it together once, I'm going to start with the boiler. Before the boiler gets fitted to the chassis, I'm going to put the boiler bands on, and I can do that because if you remember, I made a drawing showing the spaces that I want the boiler bands to be on the boiler sleeve. So we'll crack on and do that. I'm not going to be teaching you to suck eggs, so I'll only be showing certain parts if there's any parts of the build that are different than before. So we'll just crack on. Okay, as you can see, we've got the painted boiler sleeve attached and the mounting foot on the end. So now it's a question of attaching the 3 boiler bands. 1, 2, 3. And what I did before was make measurements in relation to the boiler sleeves of where the boiler band should come. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to tape off, I'm just going to mark these places now and temporarily attach the boiler bands and then fan to the right place. So I'll get on with marking them up and then I'll get back to you. Okay, so what happens here, the first one, according to the piece of paper, the one nearest the rear of the locomotive, that has to be 8 millimeters from the curve from the steam dome here. So this is masking tape that is 8 millimeters wide. I've managed to thread the boiler band on top, and I'm just resting it on here until I get it in a bit of place, and then I'm going to move it across and tighten it up. So let's give that a go. I've never done this before, so let's give it a go and we'll see what happens. It needs to be there. Tighten it up. Okay. Hold it. Now let's just check this out. See whether it's right. That looks fine. Tighten it up a bit more. Of course it needs to be flat underneath. So all these things have to be in line and then we're alright. Remove the masking tape, I can see it a bit better then. That's that one. Yeah, okay, that's the first one. So I'm going to do the same again with the other 2. This one's 7 millimeter from the edge of the hole for the safety valve, and this one's 2 millimeter from the end according to the picture, so I'll just crack on with those now. Check. Yeah, and I'll just give this a couple of turns with the 10 BA spanner. There we have it. Let's remove this stuff. So there's the boiler with the bands on. It's now a question of putting it back into the chassis. So we'll give that a go. Perhaps put the safety valve back on first to make sure nothing gets in the boiler. That's good practice. Yeah, according to the instructions, the idea is that you pin the return crank to the crank pin by drilling a hole, a 1.6 millimeter hole through the middle of the return crank and then putting a pin in. I'm not going to do that. I must admit that sounds a bit dodgy to me, especially with my skill level. So what I've actually done concerning the crank pins, so that I can see that they don't maybe move on that the return cranks don't move position on the cranks, which is vitally important for the valve timing, is that I've just marked the end of the crank and just scratched the surface on the crank that sort of shows me, gives me an indication of how it is in relation to the return crank, how the crank pin is in relation to the return crank, and I've also put a bit of paint on there as well. So that's how I'm going to keep it, and I know there's a few people that don't actually put in a pin, but we'll see how that goes as time goes on. So anyway, let's crack on with the cylinder cladding. Make sure you get the right one for the right side. I think that's this one. Goes on like this. Very simply, like that. Other side, just clicks on the top. Job done. Then we'll assemble the rest of the stuff. I'll come back to you after. Okay, I don't know whether you can hear that outside, but it's just started to throw it down with rain. So the smoke, the front plate is on, the smoke box is on loosely. So we have to feed the superheater pipe in now. Go over all of this stuff. Yeah, let's move this out of the way. It needs to go something like that. Okay, that looks okay. I'm gonna put the chassis on its head, no, on its side, so I can feed in the bolt. Okay, that's that. Tighten this up first, and then what we need to have a look at is if the boiler is square, and it looks square to me, so I'm quite happy. So perhaps we can tighten it up now. Okay, so there we have it. Boiler's back on. So what we'll do is tidy up the back end, put the burner back in, all the connections, connect it all up, and then we can crack on with the next stage. Okay, so there's the rear of the boiler all connected up again. The burner's in, the gas feed pipe, the painted steam lubricator attached, radio control attached, and you can't see it here, but underneath the battery, the original battery box cover is also fitted again. Certainly helps when you've actually already assembled it once. One of the odd jobs that need doing before reassembling is to do with the fine scale boiler bands. Now these are brass, and they've been polished up nicely, but what's going to happen is over time they're going to tarnish, so they're going to lose the brightness, if you like, of the metal. So what I'm going to do is, oh, by the way, I've polished them up with this stuff, Brasso, commonly used in either way in the United Kingdom for polishing up metal. So they've been gone over with Brasso, and what I'm going to do is to make sure they don't tarnish, and the way to make sure they don't tarnish is to keep the air off the metal. So what I'm going to do, I've got some acrylic clear paint, and I'm going to just put a layer of this paint onto the band, each of the bands, and that should keep them nice and shiny. And then with the brush, what we'll do, we'll go over each of the brass boiler bands. Obviously the most important bit is this bit in my logo, because it's a tank loco, tank engine, so the half of it won't be seen. just a thin layer. So I'll just put this out of shot to dry, hang it up.